Hello everybody, and welcome to this Landlord Law webinar, which is on the things you need to do when getting ready to let. Now first of all, I'd just like to check that you can hear me properly, so if you could just raise your hand if you can hear me, just to make sure that the sound's working properly. Yes, okay, that's excellent, people can hear me. I'm going to hand over to Dave in a minute. This is the second webinar I think that you've done on in the series, Dave, isn't it? And we had the first one, which was on buying, and then this is on what you need to do when you're getting ready to let the property. If you have any questions, you will find in your GoToWebinar panel that there is a questions bit, and you can put questions in there, and at a suitable point I will ask them to Dave. Now, I'd just like to point out that if you've now transferred over and you're part of the new Landlord Law site, we do have a property checklist, which is on a similar thing, getting the property ready to let. And you will find that if on the header you see content types, and then on the drop-down menu, Landlord Law checklist, and then you scroll down, it's the first one, which is the property checklist. When we've finished the recording, as well as going on the webinar recordings, I'm also going to put it there as well to help people when they're getting property ready to let. So anyway, Dave, welcome to the webinar.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
And take it away.
Okay, right.
I better move the thing on, hadn't I?
Yeah, I've got a PowerPoint just to aid memoir, really. Right, so this webinar is going to be looking at the things that you need to consider when you're preparing to let a property, either for the first time or between the change of tenants. And the previous webinar we looked at the sort of things that you should consider from a safety point of view when you actually are considering buying a property, because there are quite a lot of hazards which are affected by the type of property you buy and also by the location as well. So we covered those last time. Just a bit of background, I'm Dave Prinsep. I'm an independent housing consultant. I have the background in enforcing legislation for local authorities and for the government, and I've consulted heavily with the government on a lot of issues, but I've been involved in health and safety for more years than I care to remember. And so if we can have the first slide.
Okay, let's move that around. There we go.
Okay, so what we're going to look at first of all is the sort of things that you just need to consider, the legislation that affects property safety issues. And the first is really the health and safety of the accommodation, that all premises must be safe. And the system which is used now to assess the suitability of a property is the wonderfully named Housing Health and Safety Rating System, which is a tongue twister in itself, introduced in 2004, and this is enforced by the council, and it's there basically to try to ensure that the property that the landlord provides is safe and healthy. Prior to this system, basically the property standards were judged by repair, whether the property was in good repair or not, and they found that what the problem was, that a lot of the things which were adversely affecting people's health couldn't be put down to disrepair. They were Victorian properties which were built without any central heating or with inadequate insulation, and they couldn't deal with it, so with disrepair, so they brought in the rating system. There's 29 hazards, and so there's quite a lot to get through there, and basically it's concerned with disrepair if the disrepair affects the health and safety of the occupants. If you've got a missing handrail, it's fallen down, then that would be disrepair. It covers also things that are missing, which, for instance, some staircases, for instance, were built without a handrail. For disrepair, you can't do anything about it, but under the rating system you can, and design as well, if the property's been designed badly or built badly. Okay, so that's one of the areas. Let's you need to be aware of. Next
Okay,
slide.
shall I move on?
Yep. Okay, now the hazards, there's 29 of them, and this is just a list of the hazards, split into physiological, which is effect on the body. That is by far, those lists there under the red, psychological are the issues which have by far the biggest impact on people's health. Then we have psychological, some hazards there, and this is where it affects people's well-being and attitudes within the family. And obviously we've got overcrowding, which can be quite stressful, noise, lighting is an issue, and entry by intruders as well. Very few people are actually injured by burglaries. Aggravated burglary is relatively rare, but research has shown that 80% of people who are burgled are psychologically affected by it, and some people are severely affected up to the point that they won't actually go out. Then we've got infection, which is self-explanatory, and accidents, which is falls and trips, etc. So those are the 29 hazards split up into the 4 sections, which we need to look at this stage. Next.
Okay, I just mention at this stage that there is also there's 2 articles actually, one of them quite long on the Housing Health and Safety Rating System. One of them was written by Stephen Battersby, so that's there if you want to find out more about it.
Yes, he was one of those who instigated the system.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's some guidance which is worth downloading. It's very easily accessible on the website if you do a Google search. And I would advise you to get a copy of these just for reference. I wouldn't suggest you necessarily read, certainly through the operating guidance, which is the one on the left, which is the document used by enforcing officers. The one on the right is worth reading through. It's not that long, and it gives you an outline of the sort of things that you need to be aware of when you're letting a property. Okay, next slide.
Okay, hang on a minute.
Okay, so we've got one of the requirements is health and safety. Then we have maintenance, which is basically disrepair. Again, this covers all dwellings. And there's 2 major pieces of legislation, the Landlord and Tenants Act 1985, Section 11, which places an implied term on in all tenancies that the property keep the property in good repair. And there's a plethora of legislation about what is disrepair and what is the liability of a landlord for issues. This is enforced by the tenant. Basically, they can sue a landlord if a property is in disrepair, or they can, and it's often the case, they will do a counterclaim if there's a possession, particularly for rent arrears, because damages will be awarded but to the tenant, and that obviously then counteracts any rent arrears that they may have accrued. And houses in multiple occupation, obviously there's regulations which are enforced by the council here. All HMOs have to be maintained in good condition. It basically deals with maintenance. If the local authority wants something to be done, improved, then they have to use the rating system. But housing multiple occupation, the regulations apply to all bedsit type accommodation, all shared houses as well, and also some converted blocks of flats. Okay, and then there's quite a large number of various regulations and orders covering services, furniture, electricity and equipment. So basically maintenance issues. Okay, next slide.
There you go.
Okay, when it comes to repair, it is only for repair. It's not improvement. As I say, under the Landlord Tenants Act, there's a lot of discussion about that. Now, this is the time when you need to look at your properties. You need to look at the properties to make sure that they are in good repair and in a healthy condition. And you obviously need to just be aware of your competence. With disrepair, it's not often so difficult. If something isn't working or broken, or then you can normally tell it. But if you don't have the confidence to know you may have to consider getting a surveyor in just to have a quick look at the property. But for disrepair, certainly most of the issues are relatively straightforward. There are now some of the inventory clerk companies will actually do a survey of the property and highlight not just for the deposit legislation, but also highlight any issues of maintenance and repair there. And also, some builders and contractors.